One of the biggest keys to beating Ohio State? Not as obvious as you think.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it's that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And the NFL playoffs, they're almost here. But it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thoughts on the Diego Pavia rule, and how we feeling about special teams going into the Rose Bowl Quarterfinal, all coming up on today's show. Rose Bowl Quarterfinal, kind of a mouthful there. Yes, it's a new location. Does it matter? No. What does matter is that Oregon is going to try to slow down an Ohio State passing attack. That was dynamite from the moment the game kind of got going after the first throw. Will Howard had an open guy, missed him, and I thought, oh boy, they still haven't figured out. Nope, they figured it out. Face mask penalty, extended the drive, and Ohio State throws it all over the field. Is that really the biggest key to stopping Ohio State, though? I don't know that that's the answer. It's certainly a way. If you tell me going into the game, hey, you're going to be able to hold Ohio State under 300 yards passing, I feel great about that, unless Oregon's run defense is struggling, of course. But I'd feel pretty good about keeping Ohio State to a lower total than they had in the first meeting on October 12th. That's not going to be an easy thing to do, because Ohio State, in frigid temperatures, just slung it all over the yard against a Tennessee defense that I had confidence in going into the game. I thought Tennessee was going to upset Ohio State. I didn't think all the underdogs would lose. They did. I thought Tennessee would be the team that wins. They, of course, did not. They got shellacked. Now, that was in Columbus on a cold night. Yes, Ohio State's at home, but not the most conducive conditions to passing the football. I have been in Southern California for the better part of the last week, and it's going to be a little bit warmer come Wednesday, lest a massive, unexpected cold front roll into town, and that apparently doesn't stop Ohio State anyway. But that's certainly one of the keys I look at going into this game is, can you take away the explosives? Can you not let Ohio State really slice and dice you through the air the way that they have when they've been at their best this season, as they were in their first round playoff game against Tennessee? But then I thought about it, and I thought back to the great Nick Aliotti, legendary Oregon defensive coordinator, the unsung-ish. I think people now have come to appreciate how good Nick Aliotti really was in the Chip Kelly days, who of course will be Ohio State's offensive coordinator in this game. Aliotti was phenomenal at the old bend but don't break. And he's not the first defensive coordinator to come up with that. And the thinking behind it, for those who don't know, is you don't allow the big play. You force an opponent to execute down the field. You give up a bunch of yards. And then when it comes time to be in the red zone, you execute and hold them to field goals or get him off the field on fourth down. If you remember back to the 2021 meeting in Columbus, that's how Oregon won the football game. CJ Stroud had, I believe it was 484 passing yards in that game. Not 384, not 284. He was encroaching a 500-yard effort. Ohio State had 500 yards of offense in the game. They only had 28 points. Why? Because Oregon held on not one but two fourth downs that thwarted Ohio State drives. And they were able to capitalize on opportunities to go down the field and kill the clock, not give it back to Ohio State so that they could just work their way down the field and give themselves another opportunity in the red zone. And by the way, Ohio State scored a touchdown on a drive. I believe they had two fourth down conversions. I know they had at least one. But that was clearly the approach. You were going against an Ohio State offense that, like this one, had a really good quarterback. CJ Stroud is better than Will Howard. That receiving core had Chris Olave and I believe Jackson Smith and Jigba to go with Garrett Wilson. But this trio is really good. Jeremiah Smith, Mecca Ibuka, and Carnell Tate. All of those guys playing on Sundays come whenever their careers in college come to a close. But I wonder, just wonder, if you actually have to take away the passing game. If Oregon holds Ohio State to 28 points, but the passing game pops off, what's your confidence level? Oregon put up 32 points the first time around. That was at Autzen Stadium. Sure. Oregon also came up empty on a goal-to-go situation. We hope that wouldn't happen again. Either Lanning would be willing to take 3 points, or you find the wide open guy that Will Stein schemed, and you end up with 7 more than you had. That, along with the whole extra point debacle that cost Oregon 2 points in that game, that made Ohio State driving to kick a field goal for the win rather than driving to kick a field goal for the tie at the end. Of course, they never got that field goal off, but I just kind of wondered about that. I got a question from one of you. I asked what you guys wanted to hear. Now that the show is back, I appreciate you being patient, by the way. I was enjoying time with my family over Christmas. I hope you all did, or enjoying time with your family during the holidays as well. But, the questions, a couple questions came about, how do you slow down Ohio State's passing attack? Well, the number one thing that Oregon will have to do is their strength needs to be their strength again. The defensive line has to play a good game. They don't have to play the greatest game in the history of Oregon football, Nick Fairley levels of 2011 national championship game. They don't necessarily need that for Oregon to get a 7 to 10 point win, but they've got to do more than Tennessee did. 0 sacks. 0 sacks in that game of Will Howard. And not only that, sometimes, like when you think about Dylan Gabriel in the Ohio State game, there were times where he had really clean pockets to throw. There were also times where he had collapsing pockets and he got the ball out just in time, or he had to run away from pressure. So Oregon having 0 sacks allowed in that game, wildly impressive. But I think Ohio State did better with their 0 sack performance than Tennessee did with their 0 sack performance. Will Howard had too much time. So yeah, the biggest key to slowing down the Ohio State passing attack, you have to pressure Will Howard. Keep it to an underneath passing game. Get him off his spot. Yeah, he's a veteran guy. You sack him, hit him a couple times, he's not going to be phased the way a young quarterback is going to be. But the defensive game plan for Oregon is something I'm really curious about, because last year in the Pac-12 championship game, or this year in the Big Ten championship game even, Oregon has struggled getting pressure on quarterbacks, even when they've been good at it throughout the course of the season. So Oregon will have Jordan Burch in this game. They didn't have him on October 12th and sacked Will Howard a couple of times. He still went for a lot of yards. But the biggest fundamental question, how do you stop the Ohio State passing attack? You got to pressure Will Howard. And to do that, the defensive line has to play the way they have most of the season, rather than what they were able to come up with in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State. Of course, Oregon goes on to win that football game and has the number 1 seed and all that great stuff. That's good and fine. That's not the formula, I think, for Oregon winning their next 3 games and having that season that we've all been waiting for. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter at @McLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. Those be the handles. So, always keeping an eye on the future, because that's how college football works. That's how Dan Lanning is going through life right now. This Diego Pavia rule could be really good for Oregon. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you didn't want to be paying for yet? Well, that's because you haven't checked it out. So Rocket Money is making it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, and $740 a year when you use all the app's premium features. What would you do with $740 a year? Yeah, I don't know. You tell me. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. The Diego Pavia rule could be great. It could be great. So, for those who are unaware, Diego Pavia is the father of the state of Alabama. Not actually, but maybe just a little bit. Last year, he was a quarterback at New Mexico State and went into Jordan-Hare Stadium, beat Auburn. Real thing that happened. I think it was a blowout, too. This year, he transfers to Vanderbilt. That's a bowl team, by the way, in Vanderbilt. They had a preseason win total of 2.5. Boom, 6-6. Pretty solid season. Great season for Vanderbilt, as a matter of fact. They beat Alabama and Auburn this year. He went 3-0 against the state of Alabama in the last 2 years, playing at New Mexico State and Vanderbilt. So, hence the jab at Alabama, because what else is he going to do? That's the guy. So he's got another year of eligibility. The NCAA Division I Council came down and said, yeah, we think Pavia's lawsuit is well-founded based on the judge's ruling. And so anyone who has expiring eligibility in college sports this year could come back next year if the reason or part of the reason you're out of eligibility is you played junior college ball for 1 or 2 years, and that's eating into your NCAA years. And the foundation of Pavia's lawsuit was, hey, why should my playing under the NJCAA count towards eligibility of the NCAA? So the NCAA, this still feels temporary. This still has not been resolved completely, but the NCAA Division I Council ruling that everyone can do that is a pretty significant step in that direction. Them coming back and saying, yeah, as long as you have the academic requirements, as long as you are on the plan, academically to make it all work, then yes, you can play for 1 more year. I don't know that that's going to be an unlimited ordeal, because you could have fourth-year college kids playing their freshman season of college football pretty easily. You could play 2 years. If JUCO were to just not count at all, you could play 2 years at JUCO. Then you could redshirt your first year at a Power 4 school. And then the first year of eligibility you have, it's your 4th year playing college sports. And you're 22 years old. So there are still matters to be worked out. But the 2 players, there are 3 players actually, that this will could apply to for Oregon's roster next year are Jamari Caldwell at defensive tackle, Kobe Savage starting safety, and George Silva at offensive tackle. Now, Silva is not someone who has played meaningful snaps over the last 2 years with the Ducks. He came in as the number 1 JUCO offensive tackle last year, hasn't worked his way up the depth chart. But if a third-year guy is one of your 2 deep players at the offensive tackle position that is overseeing a bunch of change with Alex Harkey coming in from Texas State and Isaiah World from Nevada, pretty solid place to be. Incredibly solid place to be, as a matter of fact. But the more interesting guys for a lot of Oregon fans out there are Kobe Savage and Jamari Caldwell. Now, these, like the ones I talked about earlier this week, Evan Stewart and Jordan James, aren't decisions we're likely to know until after the year. Dan Lanning said, well, we'll know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and they're focused. Like that's, of course, what we'd want to hear. Standard operating procedure along those lines. But I don't think Savage is someone that has high-level NFL prospects. He can make a roster, maybe. But is he an earlier on draft pick? No. I have seen nothing to indicate as much. Is Jamari Caldwell in a class that feels like it's loaded with defensive linemen? Is he going to be an earlier on draft pick? No. Could it be a late round guy? Sure. I mean, you had Jordan Riley a couple of years ago from that 2022 team get drafted by the Giants in the 7th round. I think Caldwell has been a far better player than Jordan Riley was. And I mean, Riley was solid, but Caldwell has been far more disruptive and productive for Oregon this year. I didn't mean to make that rhyme. It just happened. Deal with it. I think that Caldwell has been really, really solid. When he's your probably 4th best defensive lineman, you have a great defensive line. What do you know? Oregon's got a great defensive line. Neither one of those guys, to me, are as likely or as capable of justifying a decision to go to the NFL as Evan Stewart or Jordan James. Caldwell, maybe, but Savage in particular, I would think if he can play another year of college football, he can. And you put a guy on the back end of this defense with another year in the system, and you pair him with Dylan Thineman, however it's pronounced, from Purdue, who was the top safety in the transfer portal. Hard to argue that you'd feel good about a position group that just a couple weeks ago you would have had major questions about going into 2025. So this could be a really good thing, a really, really good thing for Oregon looking ahead to next season. But could I see Caldwell putting his name into the draft? Yeah, that could absolutely make sense. And that would trigger a bigger reset on Oregon's defensive line. That's when you bring in a guy like Barry Alexander to say, hey, we want to have depth. We want to have options. We feel good about XYZ young guy, Terrence Green or Michael Gardner or anybody like that from that 23 class. And maybe those guys are ready. Maybe they don't feel they're right. We know Amari Washington's ready. I can Sharpie and him and Mateo Uyunglele as starters with Tatum Tuioti on the 2025 defensive line. But that's a question mark. Jamari Caldwell, that is, I would love to fill. That would be phenomenal. Savage on the back end, I'm here for continuity and experience production. So if those guys can return, I'd be super down. Mailbag time. Do you want to get in the mailbag? You can. YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter. Or if you want priority access and a bunch of other perks, go become a Locked On Ducks Insider. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. Bud sends this one in. First round games were all mismatches. Who could have foreseen? Love the fact that they were played at college stadiums. Agree, but the games were so non-competitive. I would love to see no buys, 8 teams, first 4 games at home stadium of higher seeded team. Get to that more in a moment. Semifinals at the Rose and Orange Bowl on New Year's Day. Championship at the Rose Bowl on a Saturday. Well, the part of that structure that really doesn't work, Bud, is playing a semifinal at the Rose Bowl and the national championship there. Because that means one team likely gets a travel advantage depending on who you are. Like some teams might just stay out there. You know, if the national championship is on the 20th and the semifinals are on the 13th, a team might be able to stay out there, whereas the other team has to travel. So I doubt that would work. But I like where your head is at. I think that's closer to what I would like to see in college football. But are we going to get there? Of course, no. We're not going to go backwards with expanding the playoff. We're going to go forwards and expand it even more so we can let in a bunch of 9-3 SEC teams. One thing that I'd love for the committee to adopt starting in 2026, because the current format and contract is for this year and next year. After that, nothing is set in stone. I would love for teams that have earned a first round bye to get rewarded with a home playoff game. Brandon sent in a question about, playing at the Rose Bowl for Oregon's first game compared to playing at Autzen Stadium. And I thought the home playoff games were electric. They weren't great outcomes. By the way, Texas-Clemson was a competitive football game. I know that Texas wins by 14. That was a competitive football game. Texas had a big lead, but Clemson came back, and that was a legitimate game in the fourth. But the environments in all these places were great. I'm a fan. It has always been the aspect of the 12-team playoff I would like the most, and that bore itself out in the first weekend. But I would like to see a significant reward for working your way up to the top of the playoff. That way you don't have this dynamic of you lose and you get a better matchup. That just shouldn't be the case. That's got to go away. Reseeding in the second round, I think, is more than appropriate. But frankly, before I would do that, I would say give the teams that earn a bye in a 12-team playoff a home playoff game. But the bowl contracts going from, the New Year's Six to making those all a part of the playoff makes that highly unlikely. I'm speaking for 2026. I think that would be a worthy solution to pursue. But the home playoff game atmospheres, chef's kiss for college football. A lot of things to get right in the sport. A lot of things are right. A lot of things are not right. But hopefully through conversation, we can change that. So, end of rant. How do we feel about the special teams? I don't know. You tell me. Let me know in the comments below. Shoot me a note. I feel good. I hope. That's coming up next. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's not number 2, not number 3. It is number 1, just like Oregon is, and hopefully they play that way on Wednesday. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I think that if you are inclined to bet on players, I know for a fact you can bet on that over at FanDuel. Do you think Oregon's beating Ohio State? You can bet on that at FanDuel. Do you think Ohio State's upsetting Oregon? You can bet on that over at FanDuel. Whatever you want, they've got it over there. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. $250 in bonus bets available if you win your first $5 bet. You realize how simple that is? You realize how great that is? How easy it is for you? FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook sponsor of the NFL. Well, in games such as this, that I believe are going to be close competitive battles between a couple of great teams, special teams can play a pretty sizable role. How do we feel about special teams? This question came in via the Twitter mentions. Sorry, I forgot to jot down your name, whoever sent it to me. How confident are you if the game comes down to an Andrew Boyle 51-yard field goal? Well, statistically, I am 33% confident. But in reality, I'm slightly more confident than that for two reasons. Number one, Andrew Boyle this year is 2 of 4 on field goals. And from 50 plus, where he has demonstrated a better capability than Atticus Sappington in the eyes of the coaching staff, and I think we've seen that as well as fans, he's 1 for 3. Oh, okay, that's pretty good. Here's what you have to remember, though. 1 for 3 from 50 plus, that 50-yarder against Michigan State. I never thought I'd see the day. I legitimately thought I'd never see the day. There was a part of me that believed Oregon isn't ever going to make a 50-yard field goal. Come on, be real. Well, he did it. He did it. Hasn't done it since. Has not had a lot of attempts. But that kick he had against Washington, I believe it was right before the half, it was a darn good kick. That was in Eugene in late November. Cold, frigid night. Now, if he were called upon to win the game with a 50-plus yard field goal, playing the game at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, I don't have major worries that he's not going to be able to get the ball to the crossbar. He was going to make that kick if it had been in, say, even October, certainly in September, or if it had just been a day game. Boyle was making that kick, and I'm pretty sure it was a 55-yarder. So he's got plenty of leg, and he's been accurate with it. The misses have not been wildly off base. So I feel pretty solid about that. And for Oregon special teams writ large, you can't overlook their importance for Oregon's defense. Remember, special teams helped create 7 points for Oregon against Penn State. Last I checked, they won the game by 8. Pin Penn State down inside the 10-yard line. Drew Aller throws a pick. Manning returns it to the 1. Boom, easy touchdown. None of that happens in all likelihood if that ball is a touchback and Penn State comes out to the 20-25-yard line. Changes the dynamic of the drive completely there. But Atticus Sappington this year, as Oregon's kicker, 14 of 16. Knock on wood, he hasn't missed inside of 40. He missed a 50-plus yarder, and he missed one 44-yarder against Ohio State. Feel pretty good about him right now. The back and forth between Ross James as the long punter, Luke Dunn as the downing punter, the specific punter, call it whatever you want. The guy who comes in on shorter punts to try and down the other team inside the 5, he's been good. Coverage has been good. There haven't been any major mistakes. The worst special teams game of the year, Oregon actually survived against Ohio State. I'd like for Oregon to not bring that into the equation again, where you say, boy, how many special teams mistakes can the Ducks survive here? Nah, don't really want to go through that again. But right now, Oregon's been good returning punts and kicks. Kicks don't get returned that often. Kickers are so good, they're mostly touchbacks. And by the way, speaking of touchbacks, Sappington, been drilling the ball through the end zone. Great. Don't give their guys a chance. Boise State's probably asking themselves, why did we give Noah Whittington a chance to return? Why did we give Tez Johnson a chance to return that ball? Well, they did, and here we are. Keep the ball away from playmakers. So I never overlook special teams. By the way, how many of those first-round playoff games did you guys watch? Because I watched all of them, naturally. Talked about them on Locked On College Football. You can go check that out on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the show right now if you're interested. But the punters were terrible. Some of that is they were punting in frigid conditions. But you put your defense behind the 8 ball when you say, other team gets the ball at about their own 42-yard line. It's like, well, dang, guys. Suddenly they need 2 first downs, and they're on borderline field goal range, whereas you down a punt inside the 15, 2 first downs doesn't even get you to midfield. So I watched that first round and sent out a tweet about it as well because I just kept noticing all these punts are bad. All these punts are bad. It's going to matter. At some point, it's going to matter. Last year in the Rose Bowl, by the way, in the semifinal between Michigan and Alabama, someone can jog my memory exactly, but special teams mattered. I think both teams were struggling to hit field goals in that game. It's like insurance. You don't think about it. It doesn't become important until it's the most important thing that you could possibly have. But across the board, return game, avoiding mistakes, executing, gaining advantage, scoring points, I feel good. I feel good. Let me know if you don't, and we'll see if you can change my mind. Appreciate you listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.